All right, I'm just starting the book of Exodus for my devotion today. My goal is to get through Exodus, Mark, and 1st, 2nd Corinthians. So today's video is going to be, how do you actually get through the Bible in less than 3 months? I was able to do it in a month, but it became a bit of an all-consuming project. You basically have to read several hours in a day. But what if you're a brand new Christian and you're like, man, I don't even know where to begin? The first thing that you have to realize that reading is a muscle. If you aren't used to the idea of reading for more than 5-10 minutes a day, it's going to be hard to get through the Bible in a short period of time. You have to build up that muscle. One of the ways of building up the muscle is to actually sit and read entire books of the Bible. Meaning, read the entire book of Genesis before you get up and go do something else. Read the entire book of Exodus before you get up and do something else. Read the book of Matthew. Read the book of Revelation, whatever. The book of Psalms and some of the major prophets are going to take a while. I'll be honest with you. It'll probably take you 3 days. Based on my experience, it took me 3 days to get through the book of Psalms. That doesn't mean 8 hours a day, but there's 150 chapters in the book of Psalms, so it's going to take you a while. So understand that at the beginning. Probably take you about 3 hours to get through the book of Exodus. So that's kind of a ratio, is to look at, if you look at 50 chapters, it'll take you about 3 hours or so, depending on your familiarity with the subject. So start building up those muscles by sitting down, and don't look at the clock. Don't set a timer, 5 minutes. I used to do that. It didn't work for me. Now I look at it to, how can I get through the book, one of the books that I'm reading, in its entirety? Whether that takes me in the morning for a bit and then in the afternoon and then I'm finished, that's fine. But you got to start building that up to a point where you can actually sit for 2-3 hours at a time and digest the Bible. Another thing that helped me get through the Bible is, in the back of my mind or in my notes, in my journaling, I am making notes of things, questions that I'm considering that pop out at me. So if there's something that I read in the Bible and I'm not sure about it, I'll just write it down, question mark beside it. So that has helped me in my journal, because I can actually go back and see what's happening, especially on my second pass. Another thing to consider is, what is the Bible about? I think one of the things you should think about is, when you're reading the Bible, is what's happening to the 12 tribes of Israel. You're going to hear terms like Judah. You're going to hear terms like Jewish people, Jewish nation. You're going to hear terms like the Israelites. It's important to understand, depending, if you're in the New Testament and you hear the word Jew, that is referring to the nation of Judah, which absorbed the name Israel in Jesus' day. So Judah comprised of Judah, Benjamin, and the Levites, because the Levites didn't have any land and they decided to follow King David. Just after King Solomon's day, 10 tribes actually separated and went north, or the northern tribes, I should say. They didn't go north, but they were actually ripped apart from King Solomon's son. So those northern tribes became Israel. So you have to think about that when you're reading through the Bible, because when you get to Kings, it starts getting a little bit confusing, because they talk about the nation of Judah and then the nation of Israel. And if you're a new believer, it's going to get confusing, because you're going to look at today's Israel and think that's the same thing as what was in the Old Testament. And even in Jesus' day, when you see the word Jew, again, that is short for Judah. So think about that as you're reading, and you're going to understand why the Jews did not like any non-Jew, which was basically the 10 tribes of Israel. They did not want them to be part of their promises, the 10 Commandments, everything like that, because they lost all that stuff. They got carried away into Assyria. Judah got carried away to Babylon, and then they came back. The 10 tribes did not come back. They assimilated throughout the world. So when you hear the term Gentiles, think about that as well. It's not just us here in Canada, here in the United States of America. That's not what Paul is talking about. Paul is talking about the Gentiles, anybody that is a non-Jew. So again, think about what happened to the 10 tribes that were scattered throughout the nations, and think about it when you are reading the Bible. And I think that'll help, because then all of a sudden it makes sense to why Jesus Christ spent most of his time going after the lost tribes of Israel. And the Jews did not like that. They didn't like it. This is why they wanted to kill Jesus, because Jesus was trying to reconcile all 12 tribes together. This is why he died on the cross. Reconcile the southern tribes to the northern tribes, which again were dispersed throughout the world, which ends up being a part of us. This is why we're able to come into that, to be a joint heir. It's not that we're Israel. We're not Israel. But because we are Gentiles, we're allowed to come into the program because Judah rejected Jesus Christ. And now Israel, the 10 tribes that are dispersed throughout the nations, they are allowed to be part of this promise, and they will eventually be grafted back in. But right now, in the day of mercy, we actually have a chance to be grafted in as a wild olive branch, if you will. So hopefully that makes sense. As you get through the Bible, you start to see what Paul is talking about when he's referring to the Gentiles and allowing us to be grafted in as wild olives. But don't forget about Israel, because just because their branches were broken doesn't mean God can graft them back in. That's who he's talking about. He's talking about the 10 tribes of Israel. So we're mixed in with that. We're mixed in with it, but we're not Israel. That's important to note. So hopefully that makes sense as you're reading through. Keep an eye as to what's happening to the 10 tribes. What happens to them? How do they get dispersed? What did they do? All this kind of stuff. What were the promises that God was making to those 10 tribes to bring them back? How would he do it with the Messiah? All this kind of stuff. And I honestly believe that your Bible will start to come to life. I know it sounds kind of complicated, but hopefully that makes sense to you. It has allowed me to get through the Bible from beginning to end, just because I can get a bigger picture of who I'm watching, who I'm keeping an eye on. And again, this whole Bible is about the nation of Israel. So think about that. Anyways, hopefully that helps. I'm just going to grind up some coffee and start my day, finish my devotion, and then I'll see you guys in another video. Bye for now.